Hi everyone, welcome to WW Designs. My name is Nikki and today we are going to sew in my 3 signatures for my Vintage Glam Journal. So I have decided to do a hidden spine. So we need a piece of fabric. So I've cut one the correct length or thereabouts. It does get a bit stretched, but we can fix that. And I have allowed about a 1 centimetre allowance over the width of the actual spine. You need it obviously a little bit bigger. Then I've grabbed my punchy tool and I have already punched 3 holes in a row by 3 so that each signature is ready to be sewn in. And by pre-punching the holes, it just makes it easy to get the needle through the holes. Then the next thing I've done is grabbed a scrap piece of paper, which I have folded in half, and then I have punched 3 holes in the matching spots just to make life easier. So if you pop it on top, it's a perfect lineup. Then you'll see I have these little blue tabs on 2 of my signatures. One of the easiest and most annoying things you can do if you don't have a pattern that has a clear direction. This floral one, as you can see, it's very obvious which is the correct way up. The other 2 just being striped, I wouldn't know whether it is the correct way round, or if I open it up and I've put it in upside down, all my pages could be upside down and that would be terrible. So I'm just doing a final flip through of this one before I sew it in to make sure I like the position of each of the pages. And I then use 2 giant bulldog clips to try and just hold everything in place and stop it from sliding around, even though honestly, once you've made your first hole, you're usually pretty good. So these clips are just not quite long enough to perfectly hold down that centre bit. But as I said, hang on to it. It's all good. It's not life or death. Now, I usually always use DMC thread for my journals. I have so much of it. I can pick any colour I like. I've gone with black this time. Even though it doesn't really matter, you're not going to see it because we're hiding the spine. But I have black around the trim of the journal cover that I sewed. So we're going with that. And I measure out approximately 3 lengths of the signature that I'm sewing in. And always use a nice large holed needle, which of course I can't find, but there it is. I always pick a needle with a relatively large hole, and you know how hard they are to pick up when you have fingernails? So I actually use my fingernail to pick it up. So we have a nice large hole to try and make it easy to thread the 6 strands of DMC cotton through. And here, of course, it takes me a few goes before I get it through. I could have got up and grabbed my needle threader, but, well, you know, that's too easy. Why would we do things the easy way? Then we're ready to sew. So what we do is we press down and grab our little strip and then press it right down into the fold. And always use my finger, actually especially my thumb and the nail to hold it in place. And then you simply fold it over and press not straight through, I press slightly down. For some reason, I find this seems to somehow end up with a very nice central hole. I do exactly the same thing the next one down. I try and use my thumb to hold it in place. And that's the second one done. And of course, we do exactly the same for the third. I use my nails and my fingers just to hold it in place. And then before I punch the hole through, I sort of hold my pokey tool where I want it to go before I actually punch it through, just to make sure I'm pushing that piece of paper in to the center as much as I possibly can. Then we're grabbing our threaded needle and we're putting it through. Now, using a pokey tool makes quite a large hole, but it doesn't matter. You can't see that later, and it just makes it so much easier to get the needle and thread through, because you've got to remember where the eye's going through, it's double thickness of thread. So we like to make things easy. Then we go through the fabric in the center hole, and then keep flipping it around so that your work, where the direction you're working is in front of you. Don't try and, bend over and go from the back through. Keep turning it around. It just makes it easier. Also, at this stage, you do not have to worry about the tension. You can tighten that up once you've fed it through. So we're going into the top hole here and punching that through. And because you've made nice big holes, it's all working very easily. It can be daunting to do, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing a voiceover. Trying to speak and concentrate on doing this is not necessarily the easiest way to do things. So I thought I'll just do a little voiceover for this one. So then we have to go back down through the center hole. And what I do is I see how I've pulled the thread, and then I'm putting my needle as far to the left as possible through the hole. The main reason being I'm trying not to strip the DMC thread. I'm trying to keep each 6 strands nicely together. It's no big deal if you do split them, but I've just got this thing, I try not to. Then we're just feeding it through the same hole again. And if you do split it, don't panic. No one's going to see any of this because we're doing a hidden spine anyway, but I just find it gives you a little bit of a neater look. Then we're going down to the bottom one. And again, we're just feeding it straight through. We've made nice large holes, so as long as you got a good grip on things, it will just go straight through. Except this time it's being a bit naughty, but you just feed it through. You will eventually get there, and don't panic about it. Sometimes I look just to make sure it's flush down into the fold, but there we go. We're through. So now you need to gently pull all your bits together, and that way you make sure it's as firm as it can possibly be. I always check to make sure I don't have any lumps or bumps or maybe a knot. And then I just give it a nice gentle pull the whole way through. I take one of the strands and I fold it underneath that top bit there, just like that. Give it another gentle pull. Don't pull the daylights out of it. You might tear your papers. And then I do a double knot. It is that simple. Voila. Our first signature is done. Now, what I'm going to do here is I will sew the next 2 in, but I won't force you to watch it. You can see exactly how I do it. Use this video, stop it and start it, if you want to try and follow along. But I'll be back when I've put the other 2 in. They're all in, and there's your hidden spine. You're not going to see any of this, but it looks exactly the same as it would on a journal with an exposed spine. So what I've done, see the little threads that normally hang down? I've just tucked them up in to each signature so that just in case I have any glue dripping, leaking, whatever, they don't get involved. So I'm going to use my favourite glue. You'll see I've put 2 little pencil marks on the approximate width of my piece of fabric. So Hellman's Tiger Glue is my absolute fave. I've done hidden spines with this before, and once it's dry, honestly, this glue is the bomb. It holds solid and does not move. So being nice and generous with the glue, you want a really super solid coating. It will dry completely clear. If you have any sort of seep through a bit, don't stress. It dries completely clear. It's fabulous. So yes, just wiping the little excess off there. I'm just using a little old cheapy spatula to try and make sure I sort of coat basically every little bit. Don't panic about the edges and the top or the bottom if you can't quite get into those nooks and crannies. What I will often do is after I have sewed glued in the signatures, I will just go around lifting up the entire edge the whole way around and adding more glue if required. But try and get a really good solid coverage of glue here while working as quickly as possible, because, you know, it does dry quite quickly, but you've got a bit of time with this fab glue. Otherwise, use Fabri-Tac or any fabric glue you are going. In this case, it's fabric on fabric, so just use what you've got. I love my Helmers. It's nice and cheap and easy to get here in Australia, so that's my favourite. So I always start putting the front bit down first and then just pressing that down, trying to make sure it's relatively straight. I'm not too paranoid if it's not too bad. And then press into the edge where that first signature is, and then flip it around and just pull it across to try and get it down nice and smoothly. And again, as I said, I don't care if I have a little bit of, if the edge isn't perfectly down, I go around once I've got it done and put down a bit of extra glue for any little bits. But honestly, this glue, once it's done and down, it will not move. It will not come undone. It's just superb. That's it. So then I usually grab a book or two, something along those lines, and I just let it dry for a few minutes with the signatures held upright. After I've glued and pressed and pressed and pressed. I forgot how long I pressed for. See, there we go. There's a diary. The glue hasn't really seeped through, so I'm not worried about the book attaching itself to my journal. It's good enough. And then I just leave that there just for a few minutes, letting it dry and just solidify. Doesn't have to be perfectly dry, but the more you fiddle, the more chance you have of it not adhering really cleanly. I'm just making sure it's not sticking. And we're done. And as you can see, I have plenty of room in here. I could have added more pages to my signatures, but I'd rather have the space ready for decorating than having too many pages. This is going to be a very elaborate journal. It's not all about lots of writing space. And then finally, the last thing I do, I've grabbed a scrap of fabric, which I am just gently going to tie around this journal at what I would call the perfect place. So it's closed, but not super closed, and let the glue dry super solid. And then we'll be back in a few days to decorate. Hope you enjoyed this. Bye for now.